Yeah, and Tim, if I may, I mean, it's one of the things that clearly does, and you may mention it, and so forgive me for tackling you before you get there, is that it also tells the potential buyers of the business that the owner is, it's not dependent on the owner, right, and everything that's in the head, because that gives you the lower valuation for your company. So if you could
Yeah.
expound on that.
Oh yeah, and to build on that, Helen, I asked him. I said, the person who bought your business, how many years had they been in residential building? His answer: had never built a home in his life. He didn't have to, because he bought a book about building homes. He didn't have to have experience. And so often when we go to sell our business, we're selling to a very small pool because we're dependent upon selling our business to someone who's already an expert in our business. But if you have the $1 million book, you don't have to do that, because your book is all about how to run this business in the most efficient way possible. And if you think about a franchise business, anyone ever owned a franchise? Been involved? Yeah. So a franchise business, essentially, when you buy a franchise, what are you buying? You're buying a book that says this is how this franchise operates, based on the thousands of operators that have come before you who have successfully run this particular franchise. So they take all the best practices from all the owners of the franchise and they write a book. And when you buy that franchise, essentially what you're getting is that book on how to successfully operate this business. And when we think about this idea of kind of a franchise, what comes to mind is the book that you're responsible for reading, the E-Myth. I hope you enjoyed reading this book. This book was named at one point the best book ever written for small businesses. It sold more copies than any other book on small business. I remember reading this book when I first got into business. This would have been back in the mid to late 1980s. And it was such an eye-opener for me, this idea of creating essentially a business template for my business. And I don't know how many thousands of copies I've either bought or given away since then. So let me go back to my screen here, because I want to spend a little bit of time now talking about the book. So in the book, one of the first things Gerber talks about is this idea of the fatal assumption. The fatal assumption. What is it that kills most businesses? And he says what kills most businesses is this fatal assumption. And the fatal assumption is that if you understand the technical work of a business, you understand a business that does that technical work. If you understand the technical, if I just assume that if I'm a chef and I'm opening up a restaurant, then based on my experience as a chef, I should be wildly successful owning a restaurant. Well, if that were true, restaurants would not enjoy the highest failure rate of any small business, but they do. And who starts most restaurants? Chefs, people with experience in the restaurant business. So that underlines this fatal assumption that if we understand the technical work of a business, we must understand a business that does that technical work. Well, what it suggests that all there is to success is knowing the technical work, and what it overlooks is everything else that's required to be successful in business. Everything that we've talked about during the course of this program: understanding strategy, understanding marketing, understanding people and leadership, understanding your financials, understanding organizational design. If you understand the technical work of a business, you understand a business that does that technical work. And I love in the book, he talks about how many small businesses get started, right? It's the individual who's working for someone else's company. And in the middle of the night, one night, he or she wakes up and says, that's it. I'm tired of working for Julie's business. I'm working too many hours, too much stress. I'm not making enough money. I think I'll start my own business. And Gerber refers to this as entrepreneurial seizure, right? Our brain just locks up momentarily, thinking that if I start my own business, it'll be fewer hours, less stress, and I'll make more money. Entrepreneurial seizure. And so that's what leads many people to starting their own business. And in the business, he talks about who is it that starts most small businesses. And you may recall, he says most small businesses are started by technicians. We think it's entrepreneurs, but over 90% of all small businesses are started by technicians. And the technician is someone who has technical expertise, who has technical experience in a particular area and decides to start a business in that area. Most small businesses are started by technicians. And again, they fail because they make this fatal assumption that if I understand the technical work of a business, that I must understand a business that does that technical work. This is what kills most small businesses. So does this suggest that all technicians are doomed from the beginning, that if I'm a technician, I can only fail as a small business owner? I don't think so. But what it does suggest that if I'm a technician and I start my own business, I've got to recognize this fatal assumption, and I've got to recognize that there's a lot more to my business being successful than just understanding the technical work of the business.